Hello, and welcome to Decipher This, a podcast about music and technology from Ensemble Decipher. I'm Joey Bohigian.
I'm Taylor Long.
And we're here today with Leigh Sampson. Leigh Sampson is a composer, bassoonist, author, and entrepreneur based in Western New York. She teaches music composition and entrepreneurship at the State University of New York at Fredonia and is the co-owner of the publishing entity Adjective New Music. Welcome to the podcast, Jamie.
Hi.
So to start off, we like to ask about how you got started using electronics or technology in music and how that's grown into what you're doing with technology and music today.
Absolutely. Oh man, where's a good place to start? I think the strongest answer to this is I went to Bowling Green State University for my master's degrees. Both of them I did bassoon performance and composition sort of at the same time. It was a little bit of a mess, but I started taking the tech classes there, and I'd had some intro in undergrad, but really the courses there were what got me going, and I studied with Andrea Rankemeyer, and I can't remember the other. There was an adjunct there who was doing like first semester Tech 1, and then Eleni Lilios on Max MSP, and that was my second year. So I did about 3 semesters there. And that led to some smaller pieces. I have to say, like, on the grand scheme of things, I am not a in-the-circle electronics composer, which I kind of enjoy. I like being on the periphery and just, like, dipping my toe in every once in a while, checking out what everybody's doing, saying hi. And then, and then sometimes it's a year, and I come back again, and sometimes it's, like, 5 or 6. And it's been interesting. And then a couple years ago, a bassoonist commissioned me to write power transfer for bassoon and fixed media, and that kind of got me back into it. And I've been doing a pretty steady flow of either fixed media or fixed plus electronics ever since. And that's really where I live. I like to have at least some element of fixed with my whatever else is going on top of it. Those are all technical terms.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, with these concerts that we're doing coming up in the next 2 weeks, we were especially interested in working with composers who had different experiences with electronics. So we're really excited about seeing the different approaches that everyone is going to take. You mentioned you're a bassoonist as well, and we saw that you wrote a book actually about bassoon multiphonics, extended techniques. We were wondering if at all your experiences working with those extended techniques and multiphonics and bassoon affect the way you think about electronic sounds at all, how you create electronic sounds or any of the way that you approach electronic music.
Yeah, definitely. I got into contemporary techniques, extended techniques, whatever you want to call it. There's no real extended techniques, in my opinion. Like, the first extended technique was using a bow on a string.
Yeah.
And that was, everything in Europe was plucked until somebody came back from the Silk Road with a bow. And so I really love picking on the term extended techniques because it's all just part of the possibilities of an instrument. Some of them are more contemporary than others. And I really love bringing up the fact that, bassoon's got this whole multiphonic thing started, woodwind multiphonic thing. There was a Italian bassoonist who was like, hey, listen to this weird thing my instrument does with the wrong fingers down. And, Bruno Bartolozzi wrote it down and woodwind multiphonics became a thing. And so I got really interested, I think when I was like a sophomore in undergrad. I listened to Gubitolina's duo sonata for two bassoons, and I was like, what is she doing? This is so cool. And there were microtones in there, and actually I was such a huge fan of the microtones. I might have liked those more when I first heard it. And then, I started diving into resources for multiphonics, and the palette of color that you can create with a bassoon is obviously really expansive and diverse. And all of those contemporary techniques really contribute to it. And so when I'm writing electronically, when I'm writing acoustically, it's always about what are all of my possibilities and what's going to play best into this one individual piece. And so a lot of what I experiment with is the color palette and how it cycles around a concept for a piece or a set of pieces. I've got a couple of different works that are purely acoustic that really explore introductory level contemporary techniques for instruments, but they're all based on Shakespeare words. So I've written 3 of them now, Crossed and, what's the second one? Strife and Toil, and they're all about that Gubitolina style duo where there's some really cool sounds, but my latest ones have been a little bit easier than hers to give a good, strong intro so that the next time a sophomore comes across her piece, there's some like gateway to that as well. Yeah, and so I think a lot of my work is conceptual, and then I try and think about, how sounds, what type of sounds I can bring in that tie to that. So there's actually, in the piece I've written for you guys, there's a lot of sort of goofy sounds, but I titled the piece Riddle Me because your ensemble decipher, and I was like the whole getting to the title made me very, very happy. And then there's not a lot of sound effects that really have to do with riddles so much, except for asking some question words. And so I tried to find stuff that really matched conceptually. So there's a lot of I don't know why this fit in my brain, but there's a lot of bird sounds or wing flapping sounds, either forward or reversed or processed. There's some hilarious processed ones. They made me very, very happy. And all of that kind of leans into this being, it's not a joke piece, but there's a lot of funniness to me inside of it. And that's the way I like to write. And it doesn't matter to me whether it's extended technique, standard technique, whatever. However I get to the sound world that fits this little planet that I call each piece. That's that in the greater universe of Jamie's music. That's sort of what's important to me.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned text a little bit with the Shakespeare. I want to ask specifically about text in this piece, that at least what you have in the score that you wrote for us. But could you talk a little bit first just about how you use text in general, whether it's in something that's like actually vocal song text or in other contexts as well?
I use text in almost every piece. I'm poetry obsessed. I'm reading obsessed. There's never fewer than you are. I mean, they're not gonna be able to see this on the podcast, but I'm sitting in front of a wall of most of the fiction books in my house. My office is just one of the rooms in our house, and there are books everywhere. So I've always been an avid reader. I can read really fast if it's really silly. If it's really, light fiction, I can fly through about 300 pages in just a couple of hours. And when I started writing, I got connected to some vocalists who said, write me anything. And I took them very seriously. And so I've had this beautiful and wonderful side of my composing life that is very vocal centric. And that's going to continue. It's continuing today. I'm usually working on a few pieces at a time, as well as a few books at a time. And right now, one of them, at least one of them, is a vocal piece. And it's just a huge part of the way I write. So a lot of stuff comes back to some sort of poem or some type of text. And for Riddle Me, I decided to use a few different riddles from some of my favorite stories. And I am trying to remember all of them. How is a Raven Like a Writing Desk, I think, is one of the ones. And I've been doing a deep dive into Alice in Wonderland. Someone asked me to write a series of art songs based on banned books, using text from books that had been banned at some point. And the pandemic kind of squashed that project, but I had been doing such a deep dive into Alice in Wonderland that I kind of brought that riddle back. There's definitely one from Harry Potter 4 in the piece for you guys. And that is when he is in the maze at the end, and he runs into a being that is asking him a riddle, and he's basically like, why am I not a Ravenclaw? And I am very much a Ravenclaw with all the books and riddles and as witty as possible jokes, though some days does not exactly work.
I actually know the answer to the Harry Potter riddle, which is spider.
And then I found a couple of other random ones just on the internet that made me really happy. And so everybody in the ensemble is typing a different riddle. I don't think anybody has the same one. So everybody has slightly different sounds. And as you're typing the riddles, the keystrokes are triggering different sounds. And to be totally honest, this is one of those pieces where I kind of wanted it to be sort of random. And so I've heard what it sounds like to type each one of these sentences, but obviously I don't have 6 laptops. And so I don't 100% know what's going to happen. And that's another element of my music that I like. I am a control freak to some extent, but I also like when the weird and bizarre and, ooh, cool, that happened, occurs on stage. And so I also create opportunity for that to happen as well. So that's part of the reason why I have a fixed media track. So at least there's some shape. There's some structure to it, just in case the entertainment of these keystroke triggers don't do exactly what I think they're going to do. Some of them are constructed. There's a whole page where all of you type the letter Y over and over again, because it is this question by itself, this one letter. And so that type of thing I've constructed. All of you have a Y that fits really well together. All of you, nobody used the letter Z in any of the riddles. And so I can use some of the empty, in quotes, the empty letters to construct some specific sounds. But a lot of the other ones are just like reverse gargoyle wing flap, number 27, processed up a couple of octaves and stretched. And while it's entertaining to hear those, it's going to be really fascinating to see how they all kind of play out together.
Yeah. And is there like a relationship between the sounds themselves and the words in the riddle that you
not entirely
understood in some way?
Every once in a while, at the end of a phrase, I would pick a specific sound to go with a specific letter. So it's like a punctuation. But at the moment, and this is what I kind of love about the patch that I created, it's basically a keyboard, and I can change out the sounds as we need to. So if we get into the moment, if you guys, do the first performance of it and we realize that a section of it fell kind of flat, and we're like, it was that one gargoyle flap. It's really not doing it for us. We can switch out the sound and make it bigger or make it longer. Or this is what I really like about this is it's easy to substitute in sounds with this particular structure that I've chosen. And I did buy a gargoyle flap. I'm not joking. I bought some sound libraries. I don't have a lot of time to do my own sound constructions, and so I will buy and process. In fact, a couple of them are I couldn't get the image off of the sound file as I saved it for you guys, and I'm like, they're gonna think I didn't process this at all. It's just the way the program saved it. It's not just a gargoyle flap, I promise.
Yeah, and I like too that maybe it sort of adds to the riddleness of the piece that you're not hearing exactly what the riddle is that we're typing, but you're getting specific sounds from those letters that you're typing, and it's specific to each riddle. So it's another layer of riddles. The
only words that the audience is actually going to hear, actually there is one riddle that I ask the performers to say, to whisper, and that I think is something along the lines of, I'm gonna have to paraphrase because I don't have riddles memorized as much as I wish. It's like, what is destroyed as soon as you say it, or something like that, and it's silence. And I thought that was just such a perfect tie into music. And so that's the only phrase that the ensemble says. And then I did have some of my students record the who, what, why, when, how questions. And they had a blast. And one of them also recorded the how is a raven like a writing desk for the very, very end. And so those are the only two riddles you really get to hear. All of the other ones, I'm terrified to quote something that's not in the public domain and put it into a score. So like the Harry Potter one, quoting the riddle in the score is as close as I'm going to get. Saying it out loud, I have a feeling that somebody, she that shall not be named, will come after me.
That's fair.
So yeah, the other ones are just kind of structurally hidden, but still very much a part of the piece. It's kind of fun.
Let's listen now to an excerpt of In the Next World by Jamie Leigh Sampson with text by Gillian Connolly.
We also wanted to ask you about your work with Adjective New Music Publishing on the Lexical Tones podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So Adjective is now 11 years old. We started it in Ohio when we were, oh God, my husband was not even out of school yet. He was still in the doctoral program. We got married in 2009 and we started the business in 2010. And it is this giant umbrella for Andrew and I, or at least that's how it started, for all of our musical income. So it is a small LLC, a small business. And we started it because I was doing private lessons in Toledo. I actually had a huge studio of bassoonists and composers. And, I don't live in a city anymore, so I don't have quite as many of them. But I was teaching. About a third of my income came from teaching private lessons. So that was part of Adjective at one point. And then we were also using it to sell our scores. But at some point, we are all composers who love to make music and hate to self-promote. It gets really tiring to walk around to your network of people and be asking for financial support essentially on a regular basis. And that's a lot of what self-promotion is. There's obviously people who love to support your story. And And I don't feel guilty about sharing all of the cool stuff going on in my life on my social media pages or anything like that. I do always feel weird about like, hey, why don't you buy my book? Or my most recent piece, will you spend money on me? That's always the awkward part. So in 2015, 2016, we started this other aspect of Adjective, which is the Composers Collective. And we're a group of self-published composers. We all create our own scores. Some of us have copyists and help in that department, but basically the purpose is we all still own our own copyrights, even if we have assistance in creating and generating scores and parts. And then we sell them through the Adjective website. And we co-promote in a number of ways. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I can't afford to commission a piece from you right now, but I would really love to have a piece for, I'm trying to think of an ensemble I haven't written for brass quintet. And, my answer is, right now I'm kind of booked. When would you need it by? And if the answer's too close, then I just send them in the direction of one of my friends. And it's a really nice way to keep all of us in, we're not really one another's competition, even when we're one another's competition. It's even if we submit to the same things, even if we are networking with the same ensembles, it really is a point of pride that we have that all of us choose to be there. All of us choose to support one another, and a rising tide will lift all ships type of thing. When somebody has something good happen and we're all co-promoting it, that means that everybody's paying attention to all. I think we're up to 19 composers in the collective that we're supporting, and it's fabulous. It's really been one of my favorite things that we do. Couple of years ago now, it was mid-pandemic, so it was just last year, which feels like a couple of years ago now. We started bringing on performance partners. So anybody who is any ensemble or soloist who's interested in performing works from 5 of our composers or more. We've got a saxophone quartet that's commissioning 13 of our composers right now. It's insane. It's crazy. But they are, the Aruna quartet was just like, we're going to dive straight in and just do everybody's in. I was like, awesome. Let's do it. So yeah, we've got 5 performance partners right now and a bunch more coming on board. And it's nice to, again, like not just promote composer performances, continue that community building aspect of it and bring in a saxophone quartet, alto saxophone and mezzo soprano duo, a orchestra down in Tennessee, string orchestra, a high school string orchestra in Texas, and I know there's a 5th one, and I know it. I'm looking at their pictures in my brain, and it's right there. It really is an awesome community to be a part of, and I'm really excited that we built it, and I am trying to find this. Is it just 4 people? And this, am I being silly? 1, 2, 3. Oh my God, my neighbors! A saxophone duo named Deco Ensemble. Jake, Sarah, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. I always blank on one thing. It had to be them. The Deco Ensemble is a saxophone duo, and they live about a mile from Andrew and I, the Adjective home base, and we have a great time collaborating with them. They've performed a ton of stuff by our composers already, and they show no signs of stopping, and we love it. And then when we started the Composers Collective, Lexical Tones launched. Rob McClure was living in China at the time and looking for a way to reach out on a more regular basis to composers in the US and connect to his community both here and there. And so when we brought him into the Composers Collective, it was partially because he had no way of selling scores in the US. It was really tough for him to do that from his job in China. And so he joined. He's been just absolutely stunning as a collaborator in this collective, and he was so excited to start a podcast. And we're in season 10. I think we're starting season 10 this month, and it's just been kind of, I don't have to worry about it. It just happens. Rob records them all. Andrew, my husband, makes sure that they get up on SoundCloud and iTunes at the right time, and then I'm in charge of promoting them. And it's been really great to get to know all of the composers that Rob and everybody, like the composers come out of the woodwork that I never would have connected with other than on Lexical Tones. And it's because a friend of one of our collective members knows another person who's in this niche thing that they're just, where do we find all these people? I don't know, but it's been fantastic.
So before we finish up, are there any recent projects you have coming up that you'd like to tell our listeners about?
Oh, I love that question, and it's terrifying. I'm really excited right now. I'm working on actually one of the big projects that I worked on in tandem with Riddle Me is this piece called Ships Passing for it's for level 5 wind ensemble, and I am working on the nightmare that is the parts for that piece right now. This week I'm wrapping it up, and that'll premiere in the spring. I've just booked my first faculty recital ever as a composer because I've gotten some really amazing grants over the past 2 years, like at all 3, the regional, state, and national level. And I just realized that I need to get all these pieces performed. So in early April of next semester, I'm working on a gigantic recital right now. And so far everybody said yes, which is even more terrifying than just booking the recital, is that everybody's waiting for music now. So November is the month of finishing all the details on all of the pieces, and it's gonna be interesting. But yeah, that's gonna be great. I get to travel again. That's been new. I'll be going to Bowling Green and for a mini festival, and there's some I will get to go to Texas to see the Ships Passing premiere, but it's also being performed at OU and some Michigan universities, and so I get to travel again, and I've missed it so much. And yeah, that's just a handful of it. I'm kind of motoring through a couple of operas right now as well, and we're looking for funding, and no TBD performance dates on those, but that's in the far future, but at least they're kind of rolling along, which means that every day I sit down and I get to write something that I'm in the mood to write, because everything needs to be done way sooner than I want, and there's always something different to work on. So yeah, that's it's about as scatterbrained as my everything. I think meeting me, some of my emails probably now make sense. It's just like, oh yeah, that's the 10th thought in her head right now.
And if people want to find out more about your work, where would be the best place that they can go to do that?
So the Adjective website, just Adjective New Music, is the main place I live. I also have a Weebly site that you can get to from my bio on the Adjective site. I've stuck to a free website because why put more money into these things right now? You can find me on Instagram. My handle is JSMaestra, and I'm on Twitter, but that's not been my main communication lines lately. And I'm always on Facebook. I'm on Facebook way too much. And yeah, that's kind of most of the places. I am on TikTok, but I hide on TikTok. I just am there for the jokes. That one's actually the easiest one to find me because I'm just Jamie Leigh Sampson. I'm sure I will post a video sooner or later, but for now, I'm just there to cheer up when I'm too stressed out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Jamie. We're really
Absolutely.
Looking forward to performing your piece in a couple of weeks when we come up to Fredonia.
Me too. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person and get out of these Zoom boxes.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Decipher This. Your hosts are me, Taylor Long, and Joy Bohigian, and today's episode was produced and edited by Joy Bohigian.